start to talk about the debt ceiling fight, and the sequester fight, and the continuing resolution fight, which, of course, because Congress has refused to pass a budget, all they do is basically pass a continuing resolution to forward the existing budget that I think now we're like on our third or fourth one at this point, with, of course, the automatic cuts that have been imposed, which is, in other words, a budget. So we hear often the Republicans say, President Obama's never passed a budget. Well, of course we have a budget. It's just that it's not been done through the traditional process because Republicans are so insane. And all of this, all of the questions that are coming up in terms of the deficit, all of the questions are going to be coming up in terms of the sequester fight. Now, understand that on March 1st, there will be automatic cuts imposed on discretionary domestic spending, just about everything aside from Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, and somewhere around 12% across the board, reaching around $500, $600 billion over the course of 10 years. A nearly equal amount imposed on defense spending. What we're going to see on day one, or at least starting on day one, in terms of domestic spending, will be cuts in government services that virtually all Americans use on a daily basis, whether it's the FAA, whether it's the FDA, whether it's about building infrastructure. It will be pain and lack of services that most Americans will feel very quickly. And as they start to realize that it's going to take longer for airplanes to take off, or safety will be traded off, that food safety will diminish. I mean, on and on and on, across the board. And that's important to note as we enter into this period, because we're going to be hearing a lot more about it in the coming weeks and months. Because the fight is going to come down in terms of progressives and liberals, and in terms of the deal that Democrats end up cutting with the Republicans, between the idea of pushing these cuts into the future on Medicare and Social Security in a way that is incredibly insidious, in a way that has far less accountability, and particularly in terms of political implications, as opposed to cuts that Americans are going to feel now and be able to point to what is happening in Washington to what is happening on a local level in terms of the services they expect. This is important because this is what the political fight is going to boil down to, at least amongst Democrats and amongst progressives and liberals. On the other hand, the Republicans, they don't want cuts to defense because this is their bread and butter, the military-industrial complex, which is not to say that it's not the bread for Democrats. It's just not the bread and butter. Or maybe it's just the butter for Democrats. But part of how this will shake out, as we start to hear of Republicans having to go on trust retreats with each other, God knows what they're doing on this retreat. But as they go on a retreat to plan their strategy in terms of dealing with the debt ceiling, and the numbers coming out now in terms of polls as to the implications of defaulting on our debt and what it will do to the American economy, what it will do to the world economy, what it will do to government services, is not looking terribly good for Republicans. And so what do you do when you've promised your base that you're going to vote one way and the rest of the country and your taskmasters on Wall Street or in industry are telling you to vote the other way? Well, you go on a trust retreat. And I've spoken about the misalignment of incentives between what you could call national Republican leadership and members of Congress. And this is why some people are speculating that when we talk about the threat of default, even though the Republican Party as a whole is getting a lot of pressure from places like Wall Street, from even Americans for Prosperity, the Koch brothers back thing, who were saying, you know, this default thing is okay. Yeah, we get it, but we really don't want to do this. The capacities for these national groups and these national constituencies, the big money, to influence congressional Republicans is diminished now on issues like this, because the Republican base who have sent these congressmen to the House, they've drunk the Kool-Aid. They think a national debt default is no big deal. They think this is what we need to do because, well, I mean, they're ignorant and they are radical in some respects. And that's why you're going to see a split between the Senate Republicans on this issue and the House Republicans, because the Senate Republicans still have to run in states that have, I should say, only a minority of fanatics. They cannot afford to be that far to the right. Now, many of them are afraid of getting primaried, which is really the biggest threat that a Senate Republican has, that they're going to get primaried to the right, because then you're only playing on the playing field of the lunatic fringe, i.e. the Republican base. That is why you see people like Todd Akin and Richard Murdoch go down in flames, at least in this cycle. There was others in the cycle prior. And so the debt ceiling issue is one in which we could see the Republicans essentially vote against. Now, there's a question as to whether or not that so-called Hastert rule will apply, and it'll be an interesting litmus test to see if it's important, but it seems impossible that Bonaire will not bring this up for a vote, in which case you'll get more Democrats who will vote to raise the debt ceiling limit, but we shall see. I have to say that I think President Obama, based upon his press conference on Tuesday, is at the very least indicating, and I should remind everybody we've got to trust but verify on this situation, because we've heard him say this before, that he's not negotiate on it, and he's going to wrap this around the Republicans' necks if they actually plunge our economy into some type of catastrophic event. As to the other issue, we'll be talking about this more in the weeks to come, but that will push the real debate onto how to forestall the sequester, the automatic cuts that were imposed because of the last debt ceiling fight. You'll recall the last debt ceiling fight created the super committee that was supposed to come up with a way of closing the deficit by $1.2 trillion, or come up with better cuts worth $1.2 trillion. They couldn't, so the sequester kicked in automatically. Now, it's quite possible the deal could be just, let's kick it down the can down the road another 3 months, and then another 3 months, and then another, 6 months, year, whatnot. There is legitimate concern that the president will take the posture that we must negotiate with the Republicans to limit the cuts to discretionary spending, and do so by cutting Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits in one shape or another. That is going to be the big fight on the left. The leverage, supposedly, that Republicans have is that we would be facing 12% of domestic cuts across the board. The leverage that Democrats have is that Republicans really don't want to cut defense. And so those will be where the lines are drawn. But before, we will talk about that. We'll have plenty of time to talk about that in the coming months. But like I said, I think it's the Hill's reporting that House Republican leaders are weighing several options for legislation that would combine an increase in the debt ceiling with cuts to federal spending as they attempt to coalesce around a strategy at the annual House GOP retreat, which begins on Wednesday, that would be yesterday, in Williamsburg, Virginia. And it remains to be seen what they're going to, how they're going to approach this, but they're clearly on their heels right now.